Welcome back to another exciting episode of Jay-Z versus the movies. Today, we're talking about... Oh wait, there's no movie there. Shit. That's gonna be a lot of these. We're talking about Press Start. Which is a fan film. Another fan film. I know, I did the Mega Man one, and now it's like... A lot of these are gonna be fan films, because video game companies haven't done what they need to do in order to make great movies. And this isn't based off of just one video game. You remember Ready Player One? That's what I should have put up there. You remember Ready Player One? I do. It's only my favorite book of all time. And the sequel, the second one. This is a lot like that. I know a lot of people don't like Ready Player One, but it's chock full of references to video games, and the logic of the movie is that they're basically within video games. It's a lot like that show Living in 8 Bits, if you've ever seen that. If you haven't seen that, go watch that. That's a pretty enjoyable YouTube show there. Now this is like I said, a fan film. It's up on YouTube if you want to watch it. Press start. The second movie is also on there, but you have to pay for it. It's like $2. I don't recommend the second movie quite as much. We'll review that at some point, but I remember it being, just not quite as good. They lean into the aspect from the first one. Like, one of the big funny jokes in this movie, the humor in this movie is super on point, especially if you know video games. All of the references are pretty hilarious, but even just the humor in general is pretty good. But one of the big jokes of the movie that becomes a running joke throughout the whole movie is the Giacomo trading card game, which is just basically the Pokemon trading card game. And there's like these kids playing it at the beginning, and our main guy, Zach Nimbus there, who's just some guy. He's not really a reference to anybody, although his stuff kind of looks like Ken from Street Fighter, which you can see here. He's got this like big tall hair, you know, like any anime sort of protagonist or whatever, that kind of thing. Or maybe like Cloud Strife, because he does the sword thing where he, like, you know, does that after every battle. And people like force him to do that. They're just like standing there listening to the music, and he's just like looking like, what do I need to do? And he's like, I guess that's what I need to do. Stuff like that. It's just really funny. Anyway, so at the beginning of the movie, like near the beginning, these little kids are playing this trading card game, and the one stands up. Basically, it's kind of like out of Shenmue, the kid with the, like, his voice doesn't match this kid at all. But, you know, like, the guy in Shenmue who's like, hey, mister, blah, 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 you know, he sounds exactly like that. Anyway, so he's like, hey, you should really play the Giacomo trading card game. And Zach's like, fucking hate that shit. No, who wants to play this? This is a trading card game for little kids or whatever, right? And throughout the movie, they keep doing this. Like, there's this tree boss who's voiced by Aaron Hansen, by the way. I have that on my list. This is all of the references from the movie there, in order. So we're going to talk about all that here in a second. I'm probably just going to kind of go through the list and talk about them. Anyway, the tree, he's like, Zach's like, wait, why do we have to do this? Can't we just do like an elaborate bike race or something? You know, like Excite Bike. And he's like, I'm a tree, I can't really do that. And then he's like, maybe we could play the Giacomo trading card game. And he's like, God damn it, I hate that game. And so then they start fighting or whatever. So, and then there's like a bunch of times throughout the movie they bring this up. And then one of the best payoffs to that joke is at the very, very end. The Count Nefarious Vile, which is like this Ganon type motherfucker. But he's like really not that intimidating until the very end of the movie. You hear him say all these things that he did, but he just sounds like an idiot when he's saying them all. He's like, oh, I enslaved all of this stuff. That was good. And then Sam, who's another character, she's based off of Samus or whatever, like, says like, no, but like, this is why that was so incompetent of you to do. Stuff like that. You know, he doesn't seem very competent until the very end of the movie, where you see him like actually battle the cast. And, like, awesome final boss fight, you know, quote unquote there. It definitely feels like a video game, but it feels like if they took all the video games and put them into a movie and then adapted that. Like, that's what's so cool about it. You know, Ready Player One, it was about, like, this contest and all this stuff. Like, I still love that. But, you know, it had its own thing going on. But this is, like, strictly all about video games. Like, all of the video games exist in this world, essentially. Not, like, as video games, but as, like, different characters and logic in the world. And, like I said, we'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, so at the end, oh, spoilers for Press Start, by the way. Go watch the movie before this. It's only, like, an hour and a half long. Anyway, Count Nefarious Vile is like, he's like, oh, do you have silver arrows or armor that would regenerate your health whenever I hit you? And Zack's like, no, where the hell did I get all that stuff? And he's like, you have to do very well at the Giacomo trading card tournament. And it's like, god damn it. Point why I'm bringing all that up. It's a great joke, I mean, in the first one. In the second one, they lean into that and actually really do play the Giacomo trading card game. It just bogs the movie down. Point being, the first movie, though, is really great. It starts off... First off, it starts off with a reference to Paperboy. That's the first thing on the list here. You see the Paperboy, like, throwing the papers, and then he throws one into his grill, and then the guy from Burger Time is there in the grill. Like, manning the grill, basically. And, but yeah, then, like, the paper catches his grill on fire, or whatever, so he, like, starts running after the Paperboy, and then you see the Paperboy, like, run off, or, you know, bike off or whatever, and then he, like, runs into death just like in the game, you know? So, yeah. So it's great. It's a nice little opening reference to kind of understand what exactly the movie is going to kind of go for in terms of references and whatnot. Then we see our main guy there, Zack Nimbus, who's pretty hilarious as a character. Cause like, he lives in this world where all this video game logic is, but he doesn't, like, really get why this is happening or whatever. So, like, different things he'll just be confused about. It'd be like if one of us, like, stepped into this world and we're just like, wait, why is this happening? We, like, didn't know anything about video games or whatever. So yeah, like, he wakes up and then he, like, tries to go to his bathroom door and he's trying to open it. He's like, this shouldn't be locked. And then he, like, sees this little sensor over on the other side of his room. He, like, goes and, like, puts his hand in front of it. The door opens. Then he runs for it. And he, like, slaps his head into the door. And he keeps doing that. And he's, like, pushes the bookcase in front of the sensor. Kind of like a Zelda thing. Or whatever. And he finally gets to go in there. And then when he goes down and talks to his dad, he's like, yeah, you know, the bathroom door is acting up. And Dad's like, yeah, just use the bookshelf. He's like, I figured that out. Like, shit like that. Then his dad's, like, talking about how he runs this factory and there's a bunch of turtles and, like, monsters down there and stuff. I think it was a very clear reference to the original Mario Brothers, the arcade game. So, yeah. And then he, like, kills this cockroach, and then this guy comes and knocks on the door, and he's all like, here's your, here's this, you leveled up. And he's like, leveled up? What the hell does that mean? And he's like, the dad's like, that Mailway Fighting Academy I sent off for, or whatever. So it, like, explains why you would level up, like, in-universe. That's so clever! Stuff like that. It's like, that's so fucking cool. Like, that's amazing. All the I know, and it's like a nerd's, like, paradise there, you know? You just see all the references. And I know if you don't get all the references, it doesn't make as much sense, but for somebody like me who, like, got, like, 98% of the references, it's just so cool to see. Oh, and then he's like, it's dangerous out there, you know, too dangerous to go alone. Here, take this. So he, like, hands him his sword, and he's like, you need to go pay the life lady. You know, can you drop this payment off to the life lady? So, you know, like, he goes over there, and she's, like, the lady from Zelda 2, but she's, like, this sexy lady in red or whatever. She's just like, ooh, you could probably use a bonus, right? Everyone could use one every now and again. And he's just like, no, I'm good, you know, like, here's your payment. And then he, like, hears, trouble, so he, like, runs up. Oh, yeah, there's this old lady on the way, and she's, like, repeats the same information again and again. You know, kind of thing, just like in a video game. He's, like, talking to her, And he's like, oh, okay. And then he's like, hey, is it supposed to rain today? And then she just repeats the same thing again. So, you know, shit like that is just kind of funny because it's like that's video game logic for you. Yeah, then he like finds these monsters that were like harassing a girl or something, but he can only like two-dimensionally like slash at them like in Zelda 2 or whatever. And the lady's like, you know you can move in 3 dimensions, right? And he's like, oh yeah. So then he like easily defeats the guy, and then this like postman sort of dude runs up and gives him the next level. Just funny. I just love that. I love that. That should have been like going on throughout the whole movie. Would have been cool if that had happened more. Stuff like that should have been a running gag throughout the movie. It only really goes on through the beginning of the movie. But I think it would have been funny if he would have just showed up at like all these remote locations and shit. Like they have a merchant later on who does show up like at a bunch of locations. Like he's in the first town that they're in. And then later on he shows up like at this like abandoned like fighting dojo or whatever. And they make a joke about that. They're like, you get much business out here? And he's like, that's none of your business. You don't have to worry about that. And then it's like kind of a funny twist, but he shows up later in like this zombie infested lab or whatever. Obviously like a Resident Evil reference, you know. So, but he's like down at the bottom where they're looking for these things called the relics. They're 3 different controllers. They're an NES controller, Genesis controller, and a PlayStation controller. And they have to use them to get into Count Nefarious Vile's lair, or whatever. So they go on this big quest to do that. That's kind of what the whole movie's about. Anyway, he's got the final relic there at the end. And he's like down at the end of this like abandoned lab, like way down in there. And you see him, then he starts turning into a zombie or whatever. He's like, oh yeah, I was importing brains for the zombies or something like that. But like the last time they, so the other main character, Linku, who's like a reference to Mortal Kombat or whatever, he like killed him the last time around, which is kind of like in Resident Evil 4 when he killed a merchant or whatever. But then he shows up again, and he's all pissed off at Sam, because she's the only one who can go into the zombie-infested lab because she's got, like, the helmet and whatever, you know, like Samus, basically. So yeah, but he's all pissed off, then he turns into a zombie. Anyway, though, so that's a funny running gag throughout the movie. See, they do stuff like that throughout the movie. The leveling guy should have always been there throughout the movie, but they didn't do that for some reason. Maybe they just kind of forgot about him or something, but... He does all this shit. You know what would have been funny after they defeat Count Nefarious Vile? If they didn't want him to like be in the rest of the movie or whatever, he should just show up in the final room there, and then hand him like a level 5 card. That would have been funny. Or a post-credit scene would have done that. They do have a post-credit scene, but it's for these other characters. Anyway, that would have been kind of funny if they kept that going. So I like that gag. I already talked about the sword Final Fantasy VII thing. They have this fight, like kind of after the fight I was talking about earlier, where it turns into like an RPG kind of battle, and Zack's like, why don't they why don't we just like go up there and attack them? And Sam's like, it wasn't our turn or whatever, which is pretty funny. And then after that battle, he gets like, the guy comes up and he's like, not now, get out of here, or whatever, like the postman guy. He like slips the thing into his tall hair, or whatever, which is pretty funny. I think they should have continued that gag, like I was saying. That would have been one thing I would have changed about the movie. Anyway, yeah, there's all sorts of references. Whenever you see Count Nefarious Vile, what a mouthful to say that name every time. I could just say Count Vile, right? Whenever you see him in his lair or whatever, he always talks about like certain things, like he's always on the phone or talking to his assistant about certain things. So, oh fuck yeah, Mega Man Battle Lord. He's always like talking about certain things. One of the ones he said was like, there's this big yellow guy. He was like on the phone. He's like, there's this big yellow guy. Oh, why'd you give him a strawberry or whatever? It's like obviously a reference to Pac-Man. And then his like assistant's like, there's a giant ape outside like throwing barrels at it. And he's like, well, just take care of him or whatever. And then he made some reference to Sonic too. And then also he was like, they're like, oh yeah, they found the prophecy kid. And he's like, Jesus? And he's like, no sir, that's a different prophecy. Just the way he says it. Captain Fairy's File is kind of like the Dr. Wily from the Mega Man movie. He's like the biggest energy character in this movie. Whereas in the Mega Man movie, I felt like, you know, they were trying to be really serious. This one, like, has a lot of good humor. And I think every character kind of embodies that a lot more. And they all have their own little personalities. It's more well-rounded than that movie. Whereas that was just trying to be a straight adaptation of one thing. This has, like, multiple things to draw from. So they can make a lot of different jokes about video game mechanics and stuff. God damn it. It's all Persona 4, man. Alright. Anyway. So, he's like, are you sure? I felt like that was a character from one of my Bible adventures. That's, like, referencing Bible adventures or whatever, the game. Oh yeah, some of the enemies they're fighting are, like, they look like moblins, basically. I talked about the RPG mechanics. They have this little, like, Pac-Man looking motherfucker that'll just, like, pop up and he's like, hey! And you'll see what he's saying on screen. Basically Navi. And so there's a lot of funny jokes about that where he'll be telling him, like, what to do. Basically, he's always useless, like, always. Of course. But at first, Zack is like, oh yeah, no big deal. Like, he's not hurting anybody. And then, like, he keeps saying stuff. And then at the end, they, like, skip through a warp zone so they don't have to go to stuff. And he's like, hey, you need to go back to the Flying Piranha Bridge. And Zack's like, we skipped it. And he keeps telling him, hey. He's like, we fucking skipped it! And then he, like, stabs him. And, like, he's like, I've never been prouder of you in my entire life. Because he's a very violent character, the Mortal Kombat reference guy, you know, Linku, so. Anyway. Oh yeah, then they go back to tell his dad, Zack's dad, that they're, like, leaving or whatever, and he gives him blue potions, like, from Zelda. There's a constant joke about, like, looting stuff, too, like, Sam and Linku always, like, loot chests and whatever. He's, like, in his house and he, like, goes over to the chests and, like, starts pulling stuff out. And he's like, hey, that's my dad's stuff. Like, you can't just take that. And he's like, sorry, we're used to, like, opening exposed chests around, you know, like, taking all the loot or whatever. There's this scene at the shop with, like, the merchant, like I was talking about in the town there. They have to get, like, this map, so, like, Sam runs off to go get gold or whatever. And in the meantime, Linku and Zack there are talking, and, like, he's, like, looking around and stuff, and he finds, like, a Virtual Boy in an N64 in this, like, barrel thing, and the merchant guy's like, yeah, we don't really, this is all, like, outdated technology. You know, this movie came, I think it was, like, 2007 or 10 or something? Like, when did this movie come out? Let's find out. I don't know. Anyway, so, yeah, it was, like, a lot earlier than, so, like, those things were kind of, like, just on the out, I mean, obviously the Virtual Boy came out, like, 1995 or whatever, but, like, at the time, those could have been seen as, like, hey, this is, like, really dated technology. I know it is now, too, but, like, you know, it was kind of a funnier joke then. Like, so, yeah, so he takes the Virtual Boy, he calls it his virtual visor, and he, like, uses it at different times, and, you know, they always make the joke about how it gives him headaches or whatever, but what's funny is he uses it on the final boss, too. Sam's like, use the virtual visor, and he, like, stuffs it in his face, and the guy's like, oh, he's, like, having all these headaches or whatever, and then she's like, no, to find, like, because he, like, makes multiples of himself or whatever, you know, classic final boss thing, so he, like, uses it to find the final guy, so it does come in handy later on, so that's cool. Also, they reference the, boomerang crosses from Castlevania. He's like, maybe you want some of those. Linku's like listing off a bunch of stuff, and he always, God damn it, again, he always keeps saying like throwing stars, throwing stars, throwing stars. He's like, why do you need so many throwing stars? Just go fucking pick them up again after you like toss them at people. And he's like, no, that's wasteful. Or he's like, that's incredibly wasteful that you need all of these. And he's like, no, that takes way too much time. I would never do that, right? Or whatever, something like that. Just nice humor like that, you know, basically. There's a joke from Captain Nefarious File where he's like talking about worms. He's like, does my dog have the ones with those bazookas again? Which, you know, like, it's referencing Worms, the game. You see, like, this post of all the people that he's turned to stone, and it's, like, Lara Croft, and, like, a piece from Tetris, and, like, Luigi from Super Mario Brothers. There's a scene later on where he also, like, stonifies Mario next to his brother there. They're off in the woods, and, like, Zack picks up this, like, one-up mushroom, which is, like, you know, like a green mushroom. He's like, in my village, it's said that there was a warrior who had this mushroom, and he could never die or whatever. And it ends up coming back in the end with Sam. She, like, gets destroyed by Count Nefarious File's lightning or whatever, and then she comes back to life and ends up, like, saving him and stuff. So that's pretty cool. Good payoff there, you know? Yeah, there's a Lost Woods reference. They're, like, going through the Lost Woods. She's like, we went up, up, down, down, left, right, and she's like, I think we're almost there. So, you know, it's like the Konami code, basically. Like I talked about the Great Deku Tree earlier. It's kind of cool because they also, like, have to throw stuff that he throws at them back. It was kind of like Kirby, when you fight the tree in Kirby or whatever. But it's, like, clearly a reference to the Great Deku Tree as well, because he, like, opens up at the end, and, like, that's where the first relic is at the end there, which is the NES controller. And then, he, like, every time he holds one of the relics, he gets visions. So, like, his first vision is, like, of these, like, busty, you know, like, super hot femme fatale, like, women or whatever. And, Linku's like, there's only one place that would have that kind of reaction, in a young teenage boy or whatever. It's obviously, like, referencing, like, Dead or Alive, you know, like, the hot women and all that are beach volleyball, like, that kind of thing. They reference the Super Scope and Dr. Mario. Dr. Mario was, in the question mark block, is, like, when they see the merchant for the second time, when they go to that place with the... It's actually, like, an abandoned, area, like I was saying, like, it's interesting because, like, the whole world is basically... I don't want to say post-apocalyptic, but, like, Count Nefarious File... you know what I'm saying. Count Vile has taken it over, and he's, like, destroyed places, and you get a lot of this backstory throughout the thing. Even Linku and Sam both have their own, he, like, killed a bunch of Sam's people, and then, like, I think he killed Linku's masters, or he killed them. You actually find out later that they just got captured and put in his tower there. But, it's kind of what informs those two characters to go after him. And there's even a scene where Zack's like, well, what am I fighting for? And he's like, Sam is like, you should go and, it's for saving the world, you know, like, you don't want more people to die and all that stuff, so, that's kind of his motivation, and to help his friends, because they become friends along the way, so. But anyway, there was this part with the merchant, and he has, like, the pills from Dr. Mario, or whatever. He's like, I have these, and, like, this question mark box, which I don't think we ever find out what's in there. Linku's like, we should get the question mark box, because it might have throwing stars in it. He's, like, obsessed with throwing stars. Anyway, they need the key from the merchant to get it inside the place, and he basically gives them a side quest. He's like, if you go in there and get my trophy back, you can just, like, we'll call it even on the key or whatever, because, like, they didn't have the money to buy it. So yeah, they go in there, they fight this G. Foreman guy, which they make a reference, he used to be called Captain Psychodrive, but they had to switch it. It's like a reference to how M. Bison used to be one of the other characters. I can't remember the whole thing, but yeah. So they like do a whole rigmarole thing of like, well, wait, he's him now, and it's like, he's like, here's a flyer. This explains it all. I've been trying to get everyone on the same page now. They even reference that later when they find his masters. They're like, yeah, didn't you get that memo about that? Basically, it was like the joke. Oh, the merchant when he starts trying to hurt him, Linku does. He's like, "Oh, what do you do?" Like, which is a reference to Goonies 2 on NES there. Yeah, I already talked about the Resident Evil 1. That's like the next area that they go to. That is that. They do a training sequence in between. Oh, nice. Love this song. They do a training sequence in between, which has like a bunch of references to video games. They do like DDR and like Punch Out, like the bike scene where he's like running behind him and stuff, which was funny. Samus is trying, or Samus, you know, that's who that is basically. Sam is trying to teach him how to shoot the gun, like, which is an NES zapper. She uses an NES zapper basically. And it's like Duck Hunt. He's trying to shoot the duck, and then like the dog comes up and he starts laughing. And there's a great scene later when they're in the lair where the dog comes back and he's like, "You!" And then he like shoots him a bunch of times and he's like, "Ha ha 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 ha!" And like who's just looking at him like, "Oh my god, what the fuck?" So that's great. They do like a couple Ninja Gaiden references in there too. When they get to the next area, the abandoned lab, Sam's telling him how they tried to open a portal to hell on the other side of the lab or whatever, so it's also infested with demons and stuff. And they're like, who would do that? That's so stupid. But, you know, it's obviously like referencing Doom or whatever. At the end of the labyrinth, right before she meets the merchant guy there's also a reference to bombing the walls like in Zelda, you know? And outside, when they're standing outside, he's like, hey, well, she gets captured by Count Vile there, and Linku like leans in, he's like, hey, are you a bad enough dude to rescue Sam? And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, it's like bad dudes, like, they strip her down to like a bikini, and you know you see this guy, he's got like a name tag that says Bailey. It's like Justin Bailey, you know, like the code from Metroid. And he's like, she's like strapped to something with gears or something, and he's like, those are Metal Gears, and he's like, they're solid, you know. So it's like referencing Metal Gear Solid, obviously. He makes a joke about like, what are you gonna like rip up my body and like scatter my parts all over the world so some sap has to come and put them back together? You know, Simon's Quest. And she's like, no, I'm just gonna throw them into the sun. He's like, oh, that's really smart, actually. There's some line about like Linku like opening up his primal rage and his killer instinct, which is like primal rage, killer instinct. Then they make like this joke about how like how do we get to Count Nefarious Vile's lair or whatever? Because they gotta go save Sam and like destroy him to you know, free the world or whatnot. And they're like looking at the map. They're talking about like they have to go over the Flying Piranha Bridge and like go through a Mario Kart area and this other area, like underwater like Sonic area where the bubbles are there's never enough bubbles or that kind of thing. And there's like a bunch of other ones. And then he's like, is there a warp zone or something? He's like, hell yeah. He's like, all right, we'll take that. Oh, the reason I bring that up is because he's like, oh yeah, and then there's this area where we have to fight all the bosses again. And he's like, aren't they dead? And he's like, yeah, who knows, you know, or whatever, something like that. There's the screen from like the Dr. Wily, like you go through the levels to like get up to Wily's thing. He has that screen to show how fast, like how close they are to getting to him and his lair or whatever. It's like obviously a reference to Mega Man. At one point he gets hit by a spike when he steps on a switch or whatever, and you hear the low health beeping. So he's like, oh, what is that? He's like, did we trigger an alarm or something? And Linku's like, no, I just think you're low on health. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. So he finds this chicken in the wall there. He's like looking around, and then he like pulls aside like a curtain, and he's like, here. You know, it's turkey. He calls it a turkey leg, but obviously it's like wall chicken from Castlevania. And he's like, oh, why would I eat this? It's all slimy and gross. I saw you pick it up off the ground. He's like, just fucking eat it. So he eats the whole thing, and then he's like, oh, I do feel better now. They get in there, and he, like, puts a bob-omb, like, walks towards him. There's this whole thing with, like, Sam and Zach there, where, like, for half the movie, he thinks, like, she's, like, a guy, obviously, because, like, Samus, or whatever. That's, like, the whole Samus joke, you know, you don't figure out Samus is a girl until the end of the game. That kind of joke. And then, like, Linker tells him that Samus is a girl, you know, basically. And the whole time he's, like, been, like, rejecting her advances. Like, she's been saying all these things and, like, you know, trying to go in and stuff. But, like, he doesn't accept any of that because, you know, like, he's like, oh, I'm straight. He was telling Linku about this. He's like, oh, I'm straight. And he like hits him. He's like, Sam's a girl, you idiot. He's like, nah, or whatever. I don't know. It's kind of a funny joke or whatever, but that's a joke throughout the movie. So anyway, at the end, he's like confessing his feelings or whatever. He's like, I'm sorry, I didn't know, and all this stuff, and I, you know, actually care for you, and all this stuff. And then like Bob is like going closer, and just like, some other time. But the time is of the essence here, you know, basically. And that's when Count Nefarious Vile makes the line about, like, the silver arrows and all of that. He's like, you have to do very well at the Giacomo trading card game. They're, like, doing the final boss fight, and they're, like, all hurt, and then Sam comes back. They have, like, a momentary pause there, and she gives him health packs, and he's like, I don't have to eat this, do I? Or, like, there's no wall chicken in here, basically. She's like, no, just open it up. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So, that's basically, like, in a nutshell, like, streamlined the whole movie. That was most of the references. You know, it's just a lot of funny jokes like that, and it actually has, like, a coherent sort of story throughout, and you get to organically learn about the characters and stuff, and they dive into the backstories sometimes. You can just get a lot of nice little references and fun things, and the soundtrack's pretty good, you know, everything about it. Visually, it's all really cool, too. They do a bunch of different styles of things. There must have been, like, so much, like, costume design and, like, you know, just areas and stuff. How I pulled all this off was really impressive. There's so much variety in the movie for, like, a fan film. It's just... it's so cool to see, you know? It's such a great movie if you know video games. It's just, like, a really fun movie to watch. And it's kind of like really solid humor, like I was saying. And, you know, it's just really decent. It's just a really good movie. For something that you wouldn't really expect much out of, you know? So, anyway, good movie. Just really great. Such a fun watch. Like, I highly recommend it, especially for fans of video games, like, that know a lot of video game references and stuff. Like, I know I pointed out a lot of them in the review, but, like, that kind of, like, you know, that kind of shows the progression of things. They don't just use them to be like, oh, look at that. It's like, it's all integral to the world and pushing the story and the jokes forward and whatnot. It works. It's very organically put together as a movie. Like, it's just really impressive. As far as I'm concerned, it's a great movie. Especially for video game movies. I don't think they could do something like this, like, in Hollywood, because they'd be so worried about, like, all the references and stuff. They could never clear all that stuff. This is the kind of movie you can pretty much only do as a fan film. You know, unless you want to change, like, a lot of the copyright stuff. Which apparently they changed enough of it to get away with it, or not enough people cared, because they actually sold this as, like, a DVD, which I definitely need to get. But, yeah, so, but yeah, it was good. It was really good, actually. Really solid, really fun movie about video games, and video game logic, and video game characters. It's characters that are in a world that has video game logic, basically. And that's the fun of the movie, is all the jokes and the references to that, and just seeing our characters go on this journey, you know? That's all good stuff. So I'm going to give Press Start a 9.5 out of 10. And yeah, it's a great movie. So until next time, stick around for more reviews of movies, underrated games, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Finn.